Recording in progress. The fifth webinar, Unplugging as a Family / Managing Family of Origin Issues. So, like all these webinars, these are big, giant subjects that we could probably talk about for a long time. But let me read these 3 bullets that I've created. And then I'd like to hold forth for a few minutes. Judge Broderick could not be here tonight, and I was unable to get any young people to come on. I don't know what they'd say about unplugging as a family. Anyway, they might not like it. But so let me read this. Unplugging from screens as a family. No matter the age of your kids, screens aren't helping with the 6 I's. And this is a lot to digest. The 6 I's: imagination, independence, integrity, intestinal fortitude, intimacy, and the final stage, identity. And I'll talk more about that. Ironically, there are a lot of new people on here. So unplugging from screens do not help kids develop those 6 I's. We'll discuss concrete tips for limiting use, modeling analog behavior, and reconnecting as a family to give your kids that ineffable sense that mom and dad get me. So that's a big, long paragraph, big, long bullet point, and I'm going to come back to it. The second one, it says the critical importance of modeling, especially modeling and enforcing disconnecting from devices. We've said it on here before. You hear it all the time. If you're constantly texting an email, why would you be able to say to your kids, "Come on, get off your screen," right? And then the third one, and this is thick and big, and could be, I think, a graduate course. And this reads, how parents' emotional baggage can interfere with good parenting. We'll discuss concrete ways of taking a look in the mirror so that your issues as a parent are not repeated with your own kids. How many of us say, quote, "Oh, I'll never act like my mom or dad," but end up precisely there? We'll talk about ways of avoiding that with our own kids. So, stop sharing the screen just to see. Are there any comments or questions about any of that stuff? There's a lot there, and I'm aware of that. So I'll go back to it. We're talking about, I want to talk about unplugging from the screens for a reason. And John Broderick says all the time, there's no social emotional growth on a screen. And I believe that. I know kids will say, you know, I'm talking to my friends, and then you look around the room and you don't see any friends because they're on headphones or they're texting. And I don't believe that kids are necessarily growing in those ways on screens. And I think it's really critical. The younger your kids are, the easier it's going to be to say, look, and I would have rituals. I would say every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday night, we're not doing screens in our house. And I brought this up to 1 million parents, and parents with older kids, they give up. Their kids complain and they just give up. But I think if your kids are 12 or 13 or younger, you won't have as much of a problem. And the reason is because I think kids crave connection, particularly with their father and their mother. So unplugging. Let me dive into these 6 I's. I've talked about it before. I apologize to Larry and Bill and some people who've been on every call. They're probably sick of hearing this. Maybe I should give a test on the 6 I's. But these are the ingredients, in my view, that kids need to develop a solid identity. You'll notice that identity is the final stage here. But the 5 I's which precede identity, I think you can see the soles of their shoes going out the window. Imagination. If you Google the word, the importance of imagination, you'll read countless psychological theoreticians from Erik Erikson even to Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, and all kinds of educators like what was his name? Dewey. Thomas Dewey. I'm old. Dewey, the one of the founders of American. Maybe Bill, you know Dewey. Is it Thomas Dewey? Did I luck out with that? They all talk about the importance of imagination. So you can play Wordle on your screen, and I think, and my wife likes Wordle, I think you're using your imagination when you're playing Wordle. But when you're playing 5 hours of Grand Theft Auto, and you're pushing buttons and killing fake aliens for hours on end, frankly, I don't see a lot of imagination going on screens. So that's the first ingredient that's necessary for solid identity. The second one is independence. And here I'm not saying your third grader should be independent, but we've talked on this webinar, and there's dialogue in the public space about how do you, when do you give kids proper freedoms? And the woman whose name my wife Miranda may remember, who was, I think, arrested because she let her fifth grader take the subway in New York City, in Queens. I read about it recently. You might have heard about it. But there's been this giant shift to prepare the road for the child instead of the other way around. And there's been thinking a lot about this with these webinars. There's a big risk to letting your kid walk to school when he's little or she's little, or giving children age-appropriate amounts of independence, because you lose the confident surety that the kid will be okay because you're not with them, right? But I'm sure you all remember being a kid and exploring your own independence and thus developing confidence. I remember riding my bike home at midnight in ninth grade down Beacon Street in Newton, thinking this is the funnest thing I've ever done, because I knew there was a certain amount of danger to it. So we've covered two: imagination and independence. Necessary ingredients when your kid goes off to the work world or college and is 20, 25, he or she needs imagination and independence. He or she needs the third ingredient, integrity, which isn't necessarily the idea of not cheating in school, but is more the idea of ego integrity, of knowing that I can get things done in this world, that I feel like a whole person, a person with integrity. I've said it on here before, my phone rings off the hook with kids dropping out of college, and they don't know what's the matter with them. I do. You know, their identities are not solidifying because they haven't been given enough chance to imagine and to be independent and develop integrity. The fourth one should be guts, but guts doesn't begin with I. So intestinal fortitude, bounce back. How many adults do we hear complaining that kids are soft, that they fold easy like laundry? And if you're honest, I think you'll see that in your own kids. So that's the fourth one. The fifth one is intimacy. The anecdote that springs to mind most recently, I'm working with a young man who's 20 and did drop out of college. And I said to this kid, Todd, how many girls have you been with sexually? And he started counting, and he needed his feet as well. I think the number was 21. And that isn't uncommon. Is that intimacy? I don't think so. Is making friends on your video game who live in Portugal and you say they're your friend, is that intimacy? I think the kids are hurting for intimacy. The other anecdote, I've had 3 college seniors who graduated last year tell me, my college friend group has exploded. These kids don't want to talk to me anymore because they were drunk in a bar and somebody looked at some boy. 3 different, they were all girls telling me. So these friend groups, in my view, and I'm not indicting all of them, but a lot of times these kids lack what real intimacy is, which, if you think back to it, is conversations with your best friend when you were 12, 14, 16, 18 in college. Intimate conversations, not sexual, intimate conversations, although sexual is part of intimacy, but where you could learn who you really were and learn who your friend was and help each other with that. I think the soles of the shoes of all 5 eyes are going out the window, and you need that for identity. So all that discussion, why is it important to have ritual spaces in your house where no one's looking at a screen? You know, I can pick on the people I know, maybe Bill and Larry, but why why do you think it's so important to have screen-free time in your house with your kids? You've just come on. Jennifer Pike, hi, how are you? Who will comment about that? Because I'm getting sick of the sound of my own voice. Why is it important to have times in your home where your kids know Bill is texting?
Well, Jeff, I'll say that we have a rule in our house that all electronic devices, including the TV, is off at 7:30 p.m. so that we can have a little bit of family time to settle down before bed. The kids don't like it, but we've been doing it now for about 2 years, and it's been very valuable to our family time. Just time to chill out, talk about things, and let them settle down before bed.
How old are your kids, Larry?
14 and 15.
Are they looking at, if looks could kill, would you guys be dead, you and your wife?
One of them, absolutely. The other one accepts it.
Is the one who's looking at you with looks to kill, does he or she, do you feel like that child is sort of secretly benefiting from the non-screen time?
I think they both are drastically benefiting from it.
Can you hold forth, in what ways are they benefiting?
Well, I think that they're sleeping better at night because they're not in front of a screen, an hour before they go to bed, because they go to bed at 8:30. So after we have our family time from 7:30 to 8, we try to have them read a little bit and do something that's less taxing on their eyes. And I just think that, in my opinion, they're benefiting from it. And I think the family is too, with the conversation.
Yeah, no, I'm positive that they are. You have the 6 eyes. What I didn't talk about is, I'll say, if I asked anyone, and we don't know each other that intimately, but I'm guessing Bill McGowan and Larry, the people I do know well, and I know my wife and you carry around your father and mother. It's psychoanalysts call that internalizing the object, but that's fancy lingo for, I know my dad's there for me. I know my mom's there for me. That's, very simply put, the end result, what you want in your home. You want your kids to understand that you're there for them. I know, Jennifer, you teach, I want to say math, maybe? Jennifer Pike, do I have that wrong? You're muted.
Mm-hmm. No, I used to do tech support, but I've got a kiddo with complex needs and
Oh yes,
a lot with
I'm sorry, I've confused you with a different Jennifer who teaches at Goffstown High. But the same thing is true in the classroom. You can sit and remember who was my favorite teacher in junior high. Mine was Mr. Munger. Bill McGowan, who was your favorite teacher when you were coming up through grade school, junior high, high school?
I think an English teacher in high school, but I don't remember his name.
Welcome to the old age club. But you know the way he looked at you, right? And you know the way you felt when you were in his presence. Am I right? And that's internalizing somebody, carrying, even though Bill and I don't remember our teachers' names, you carry that with you your whole life. And hopefully, and screens interfere with that. Does anybody have an example of that? How screens interfere with actually the granular connections that you have with your kids? I'm sure, Larry, you do, because you decided to turn them off, right? But anybody else, how do screens interfere with that everyday? Go ahead.
Just a distraction in general. I know with my older 3 kids, I've got, my youngest is 17, but my older 3 are 27 and 30. And just, we had different rules for the older 3.
Mm-hmm.
They were, cell phones were basically new for them. But and they hated it, especially because we were a blended family. So different rules, different house. And they didn't like our rules, but definitely had much more engagement when, the phones were actually not in the room and not within eyesight. So just, it's just a total distraction and
Total, yeah, it's a total and very addictive distraction. I've said it before, this is the new iPhone, the iPhone 14. It's a crappy phone, and my wife will tell you I'm addicted to it. I think if we're all going to be honest, we're addicted to screens. I think just, huh?
And my youngest, I'll be totally honest. My youngest has autism. So we have that, the obsessive behavior to begin with.
Right.
And his father was an alcoholic. So he's got that addictive behavior in his history. So there's a fine line between the obsessive behavior with autism and the addictive behavior. So it's very, very difficult.
No, I think the screen addiction is one of the major phenomena in our everyday life that has gotten out of our control. I mean, Mr. McGowan, what do you see at the high school in terms of the sort of the results of all the screen time? What do you see in high school kids?
Well, I guess, is there so much screen addiction or that instantaneous response that somebody's listening to you or waiting for you to respond? And, as far as, the whole social media, it's just the problems that students create amongst themselves as far as putting everything out there. And then it gets back to them, or feeling that they can say things that they would never say in person, and creates the whole discipline issues as far as getting themselves into trouble.
Right, and making your assistant principal's jobs 10 times busier, policing all this behavior. And what you said, true, when I get a text, I'm 65 years old. I mean, I'll look at my phone in the morning and go, oh, I got a new text. As though I just discovered America, Christopher Columbus, unbelievable, like it's a major event. And I know you can all relate to it. And it's craziness. But imagine being 12 with that and getting addicted to and how many young people are struggling because they post something and they don't get enough likes. So all that goes back, if I may just show this, all that goes back to these 6 critical ingredients for baking the cake of identity. The screen touches on all of these. Imagination. How can you be independent if you're 15 and your mom says, look, text me when you get to Luke's house? Why do I have to text you when I get to Luke's house? The implication is that you don't trust my own burgeoning independence, right? As far as screens affecting these eyes, integrity means wholeness. It involves confidence. It involves feeling capable. And the screens interfere with that. Bill McGowan mentioned the instant gratification of the phones, of the screens. That doesn't develop resilience. I've probably worked with 300 sports teams, and winning is the sine qua non of the whole thing. And if you screw up, you don't have the ego integrity, and the resilience to say, I just screwed up, no big deal, I'll do better next time. Right? So the phones are not the grease that oil these 6 eyes. In fact, they're the grit that gets in the way. Don't get me going on Tinder and intimacy and boys who have had sex with 21 partners who are at the age of 20.
What could I play with?
Seem to be hearing a little kid there. But so these young people have had more intimate relationships with partners than years in their life. So the phones. So I love Larry's deal. Is that possible in Pam's house or Abby's house or Heidi's house? how do you, and I'd love to hear from any of you mystery non-camera folks, how do you create time when you have no screens in your house, if you haven't done it yet? I think it's a real challenge. Anybody want to jump in? Going once, twice? How do you really take away stuff that people are addicted to and that you, or as a parent, probably are addicted to? Well, the first way is that you limit it yourself, maybe. And you tell your kids, look, I've shut my iPhone off. And I think unless they're 16, 17 and truly addicted to it, they'll probably come downstairs and hang out with you. But if you have your iPhone in your lap while you're sitting in your comfortable chair in the den, watching TV, and you say to your 11-year-old daughter, hey, Isabella, come watch TV with mom. And Isabella knows that you're going to pick up that phone. You know, Bill, when your English teacher talked to you, did he have an iPhone in his hand? No. When Mr. Mungo was dealing with me in 8th grade, even when my dad, previous to his alcohol issues, our parents and our important people were fully there for us, and the phones prevented. So Larry, are you and your wife careful about your own, use of the iPhone at the house?
We try, but sometimes work gets in the way of that. But we try to model it for the short amount of time that they're still awake. Yes.
Nah,
But
good stuff.
I'm not doing a good job today in this workshop.
Why, you got your iPhone in your left hand, Larry? I can
Well,
tell left hand.
But the rule is all electronics. We turn the TV screens off, we turn everything off
Absolutely.
and kind of have quiet time. So that would be computers as well.
I see. I got you. Yeah, but how many Zooms have we all been on where you can tell the other people aren't even, they're looking over here, or they got this over here. It's a lot of people are very confused as to the fact that kids are struggling so badly with their mental health. But when you begin to break it down, you can see that phone addiction is a big part of why kids don't feel held. They don't feel attended to. We've talked about this in all these episodes. And Abby, if you get a chance, if you can put the links to all the other ones in the chat, so if some of these folks on here want to watch, but we've talked about the overwhelming tragedy list of phone addiction and what do you call it? Global warming and opiates, shootings. And I hate even saying the word shootings. I hate to say the word, but the kids need us to put our phones away. And even though they're 17 and they're going to hate you, if you just say on Sunday afternoons, you guys, we're not having any screens in the house. Oh, cut it out, Dad. No. And you will hear, I need my phone to do my homework. And you will hear that too. So before I go on to the next rather heavy, complicated subject, are there any other comments or questions about phones and why they're so important to limit and how you yourselves can model it? Any thoughts or questions?
Well, I definitely think that we need to model it. And, my daughter's a little bit older, but, it's some of the things that I grew up with, either family dinner night or Sunday night dinners. I do know one teacher that, they had family movie night. But I think the pandemic, the last 2 years, has actually increased that reliance on technology. So how do we talk about eliminating it, but how do we integrate it? And I don't have the answer. If I did, I wouldn't be here right now. But how do we, view technology as far as how it has impacted our lives? And I think for the last 2 years, it has a positive influence, but at the same time, how do we still go back to what life is about, that social interaction?
It's a great question. And part of the reason I think we haven't found the answers because we're all running hither, thither, and yon. Is that the same? Hither, thither, and yon, and we're all distracted by phones. I see that, Heidi, you've turned on your camera. Is that because you'd like to say something? Oh, your hand is up. Your virtual hand is up. Yeah. You're
Hi
muted.
there,
though.
sorry. I didn't realize this was going to be an interactive evening, and I'm glad that it is, but I wasn't quite prepared, so I'm sorry my video was off at the beginning. But yeah, you know, our family has really generally up till the last few years been very good about keeping phones to the side, and I feel like since COVID hit, everything's been electronic. I feel like, and my children have lost that social connection with their friends, that I have been more relaxed about letting them be on their phones much more than ever. And I feel like at this point, it's really become too much for what I think anyone in our home is healthy. Not that it's unhealthy, but it's more than we've ever had that type of usage before. And I just love hearing some of your thoughts of just saying, hey, even for a half an hour, let's just put the phone down, even keep it in a different room, so that if a message comes through, you're not like, oh, wait, I need to see what that is. It's just put it in a different room. And, you know, let's kind of baby steps back to some place where, you know, we can have it turned off and have better conversations with each other.
No, I love the idea, because the thing is insidious, you know, it's in everybody's hand, it's in their lap. You know, I think it causes childhood interruptus. I usually get a laugh from that. That's the birth control, but I think it's childhood interruptus. I think it interrupts the natural evolution of imagination that John Dewey talked about. How old are your kids, if I may ask, Heidi?
Well, I have my youngest is actually a senior at Winnicott now, so he's 17. And then I just have two children. So he's my youngest, and my oldest is 20. He's off at college.
Bill McGowan told me that your youngest is the finest student at Winnicott. He told me that before the winter.
Oh, I don't know about the finest, but he is a good student. He's a really good kid.
Yeah, no, nice. Do you, Heidi, have you felt have you ever said, oh my God, I'm on my phone too much? I put the question to everybody. Yeah, but go ahead.
You know, I honestly, my family probably laughs because I am not very technically savvy. I have a very old iPhone, and I'm really not on it very much, but I find that maybe within the last couple months, I think I've been on it much more than normal. Like I'll look at my usage at the end of the day and go, wow, you know, or you have like your, you know, week in review, and I can see that my time on my phone is kind of creeping up. Like I'm spending more time on it. And I don't like that. And I'm seeing it kind of in my whole family. So anyway, yeah, I'm hoping to get some out of the message tonight.
I appreciate it. You know, one of the last episodes, and Abby's put the links in the chat if you want to cut and paste them, but we talked about the importance of just talking to your kids about how they're really doing. As I'm sure you did every day when they were little, you know, when your kids are in elementary school, right? Second, third grade, every day when you see them, you know instinctively that every day is a giant new adventure for them. So they learn how to make a capital R, and that's a big deal. Or something challenging happened, but you check in with them all the time. When they get to be 13, 14, it's less necessary, and it's actually less necessary to do it less. But then again, when the texting interferes with your 15-year-old, the idea of giving them rope and praying that they'll be okay, just like our parents did, is hearkening back to the 6 eyes. The phones just, it strikes me, they interfere with everything. Anything else on the phones? Okay, and then in the chat, Mr. McGowan early on told me that Dewey's first name was John, and I love his books. And I'm reading up on Carl Jung a lot lately on the idea of imagination. And one of these times I'll put a reading list together or something, and I'll put my email in here now, so if you have some questions. But the second thing Mr. McGowan said, it was Brandon, and I'm going to mispronounce your name. Unier, maybe, who said about John Dewey. And then Bill McGowan wrote, quoted Einstein, "Knowledge is limited, imagination encircles the world." That's great. And I think the phones are the enemies of imagination. So let me type my email in here. And it will show up here in a second. If anyone wants to get in touch. Everyone, email, boom. And I might as well put my phone in here, what the heck. The next subject, I think, you could go to therapy over, you could read books on, and that is how to not repeat the mistakes of your parents with your own kids. How parents' emotional baggage can interfere with good parenting. We'll discuss concrete ways of taking a look in the mirror so your issues as a parent are not repeated with your own kids. So that's so that your issues with your parents are not repeated. How many of us say, "Oh, I'll never act like my mom and dad," but end up precisely there? We'll talk about ways of avoiding that with our own kids. And the most powerful, I studied Sigmund Freud in the 80s, even to the point where I want to look like him. That's why I buy round glasses. And he talks a lot about a lot of stuff that I think is nonsense. But one of the most powerful things Freud talked about, and no one seems to know about, is the repetition compulsion. And the best way to explain that, and it may be going on in your heart and in your parenting, right? The best way to explain the repetition compulsion is, if I may, to give my own example. My father struggled with alcoholism, and the first 11 years of my life, I was fairly close to Stanley, and then his drinking got heavier. And what I felt was betrayed and pushed away and sad and lonesome and enraged. But I was 11, 12, 15. I didn't know what to do with those emotions. So you bottle them up and they get buried alive. And then the repetition compulsion is you find a way to repeat that. You will find a way to feel betrayed, lonely, enraged, and so on. And if you really reflect on it and think about it, you'll have an aha moment and go, holy moly, I am doing that. Well, as most people I've met have a repetition compulsion. And when it becomes conscious to you, you get a lot of freedom. So I still am guilty of it, but in the earlier years of my marriage, to the second Jeff Levin on this call, who's really Miranda Levin, I behaved badly, passive aggressively, and pushed my wife away to the point where she said, look, this isn't working. So what I end up feeling the same crap that I felt in the 60s with my dad. Does that make sense? The repetition compulsion. You'll find a way to repeat the unpleasant feelings that you endured as a girl or boy in your current life, and you'll do it unconsciously. So again, I told you this is a heavy concept and rather thick and complicated, but people spend literally months and years in therapy trying to figure out why they keep doing the same stupid crap over and over again. And excuse my language, but the Reconnection Project explains it. And I've Googled it, and you'll come up with some very lucid explanations and books on it and articles. And if you're interested in it, send me a note or call me. And I'd love to talk to you about it, because it's going to interfere with your parenting. You making decisions that cause you to feel lousy are going to interfere with your parent. And the other concept I would bring in too, and I've mentioned this on these webinars, is the gremlin. The gremlin, which is a fancy or sort of artistic way of describing your negative self-talk. When there's a voice in Bill's head that says, you're the worst principal in New Hampshire. You can't do this and you can't do that. And we all have gremlins. I see Coach McGowan smiling. We all have gremlins that are the mouthpiece for your repetition compulsion. Mine is, Jeff, your father doesn't love you. You're worthless. Last time I checked, that's not true. He did love me. He was a victim of alcoholism. I'm not worthless. I've helped thousands of kids and I'm a pretty good guy when I'm not enacting my repetition compulsion. So examine, what does your gremlin tell you? And it will be connected to your repetition compulsion, and it all will interfere with your parenting. So you can see this goes a lot deeper than just shutting off your phone and modeling good behavior for your sons and daughters. But the gremlin will make you sad and angry and whatever it was you felt all the time as a kid. So even if your camera's off, put your hand up there, or if your camera's on, let me know if this is making sense. Anybody? Yeah, Jen, Heidi, you're getting this stuff? Mr. Elliott, thank you. The repetition compulsion. Let me see if we can lighten it a little bit. I mentioned in the notes, you know, and I have in some ways become exactly like my dad. But has any of you noticed that I'm saying something that reminds me of the stuff my mom did that I swore I'd never do? You know, would anybody be willing to share on I see McGowan smiling. But would anybody be willing to share on that? Yes, no? I guess that sounds like a no. Heidi, are you on the verge of sharing? You're smiling. You didn't know this would be interactive. Oh, you're muted, so.
Yeah, what you say makes sense. And I giggle because there's definitely moments where I feel like I do something that my mom might have done and I kind of cringe and go, oh, that seemed kind of mom-like. So like my mom like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think those moments are inevitable. You know, one of Freud's greatest contributions, although Shakespeare knew it, but Freud wrote about the unconscious. I think he somewhat overdid it. But we absorb stuff unconsciously as kids, and it has to come out. You know, if you read, can't think of he's a Boston analyst who wrote about, Freud thought the repetition compulsion was just this masochistic pattern, and it was dumb and it had no purpose. But I'll remember the guy's name in a minute, but he thought you keep repeating the same mistakes and you may know where I'm going. You keep repeating the same mistakes so you can master them and get over them, right? It's your unconscious's way of trying to get your attention so you can get through it and say, have an aha moment and go, why the hell would I behave that way? It's stupid. It's hurting my beloved ones and it's hurting me. So that's where you want to be, where you can say, I don't need this anymore. It worked for me when I was a kid, but it's not working anymore. So that's what I would say about that.
But how do we turn off those negative thoughts or feelings and provide activities, either, you know, through adolescence, whether sports or things like that, or have people learn to take advantage of the things around them?
How do we help kids turn them off, Bill, or how do we turn them off?
Well, I mean, everybody, I mean, ideally, I mean, I'm working with students, but, you know, clearly even adults, we need to do that. And how do we provide those environments that basically, you know, I mean, for me, I mean, my home situation is very good as far as where I live, that I can walk out of the school building and turn that stuff off. But how do we provide that for everybody? And there's a lot of other things, you know, emotional issues that students have, families have, but how do we provide those supports?
You know, it's a huge question, right? And if I had that answer, I'd be a billionaire. But I think one simple way to talk about the gremlins, the negative self-talk, and my wife Miranda likes this book, Relentless Optimism, by, I think it's Darren Donnelly, right, Miranda? So the book Relentless Optimism is really a sports psychology book to help you play better baseball or whatever, right? And the thing that he recommends in the book is when you, for example, when you go up to hit in a baseball game or a softball game, just notice what the self-talk is in your head. And I think he suggests you write it down. And Miranda, bail me out a little bit. Or maybe I forget, he says you go through your day, you take out your iPhone and you're like, oh yeah, my gremlin just said, you stink at work. You know, my gremlin just said, oh, you don't have what it takes, and you write it down. And I have all the kids I work with, I keep Google Docs and I have them do that. Keep track. I tell them, you get to own your thoughts. I always say, look, if I put a glass of nice spring water here and a glass of nice spring water with just a little bit, I get them to laugh, of dog urine in it, oh, just an eyedropper. Which glass are you going to drink? So all the kids go, oh, what are you talking about? I drink the clean water. So I say, well, why would you allow these negative gremlin thoughts in your head? You get to decide what you think and what you feel to a certain extent. So I would start, Bill, at that basic level. If it were I, particularly in this day and age, I would teach classes on gremlins and elephants being the overwhelming tragedies, the shootings, the nonsense. I would talk to kids at the house and in school and name this stuff. Because when I do it, I'm working with a lot of teams at Northeastern now. When I do it, the kids are unbelievably relieved. So here's an adult who apparently has the courage to talk about all the stuff that we only vaguely sense and feel. My wife has texted me, talk back to it, tell it it's wrong. That's in Darren's book, Miranda. You're not going to unmute, you're not. Talk back to the gremlins. So literally play, you can trick your nervous system. You can say, shut up, gremlin. Now I've got all these teenage boys I work with, and I use scatological language, but I tell them to say, F off, gremlin. They love it. They love it. Because they have all these other layers of burdensome worry that they can only sort of articulate about eco-anxiety, about shootings, a word I always whisper. And they're anxious enough about the state of the world. And by the way, nobody goes to a barbecue. I don't go up to McGowan at a barbecue and go, hey, Bill, how's that voice in your head that tells you you suck? You know, nobody's doing that. Nobody's talking about negative. So you have to go to a cognitive behavioral therapist, for crying out loud, to talk about it. But if you read Darren Donnelly's book, Relentless Optimism, I think people will. Miranda, did you want to say anything about that? Or are you remaining muted? That would be remaining muted.
No, I'll unmute. It was written for athletes, but it really works for anybody who has a goal.
There you go. And I think the phone's ringing at the house. So yeah, relentless optimism. And tricking your nervous system by saying, shut up, gremlin. And breathing is huge. Kids' heartbeats today are beaten 20 times more frequently per minute than they were 20 years ago. That's according to Dr. Tom Seaman out of Danvers, who's a pediatrician, who's almost as old as I am. He's been practicing pediatric medicine for 30 years or 35 years. So I asked him one night, I said, Tom, what's the research on how all this stress is affecting kids' bodies? And he said, well, I'll tell you one thing. Their heart rates are 20 beats faster than they were 20 years ago. Kids are stressed. They need us to name this stuff, talk about it with them, shut off the phones, and do our best, right, to manage our own issues. I mean, I was trained in the 80s to be a therapist, which means I sit in an office better dressed than I am now, with a Renoir print behind me, comfortable furniture, and you wait in my waiting room and pray none of your neighbors sees you. And then you come into my office and we talk every Wednesday at 3:00. And don't call me in between sessions. That's therapy. It takes a long time. I'm not a huge fan. I believe in solving challenges now, tonight. Let's talk about it and talk about it in very frank terms. And kids really appreciate that frankness. I'm engaged with a high school now in New Hampshire where there are a lot of kids who have a lot of trauma. And I said to Bill's colleague, the principal, the other day, let's do classes on managing trauma for kids. It's more important for them than taking math right now. And particularly after 2 years of COVID, right? And I happen to think it's a damn good idea. I wish somebody gave me a class in Newton growing up in the 70s on how do you manage having an alcoholic dad. I would have played D3 basketball for one thing, because I couldn't get in the high school tryout because I was too anxious. My gremlin, my negative self-talk was like, Levin, you can't do this. You'll make a fool of yourself. The gremlin led to me abusing marijuana. It led to a lot of issues. So I'm all about what my wife said. Confront it now. Talk about it now. My advice is find your best friend. Maybe you're married to him or her, if you're lucky, but find your best, maybe it's your mom, but go and say, I was on this webinar tonight. I want to talk to you about my gremlin. My what? Yeah, I want to talk to you about the voice of my repetition compulsion. Because if you do it, you'll be a much happier woman or man. You'll be a better parent, guaranteed. I've received a 15-minute warning from our esteemed producer, Abby, she's in the corner of my screen. Can they all see each other, Abby?
It depends how they have it set up, but I have you as the spotlight, so
God help you.
you're probably above everybody if I were to
I've
guess.
been waiting for that my whole life.
I know. That's why I put you there. Yeah.
So I have a question
Yes.
about your gremlin. So if you're, so I went through a period when I was, much younger. When I was like right out of high school and college, that I had, I did have like gremlin, whatever. But then I kind of turned it around and took it and did just the opposite. Because someone was always telling me that, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't, you're not good enough, you're basically you just can't do anything. And then it really brought me down for a little while, but then I just kind of just went away from it for a while, basically moved away from it, like 8 hours away, and which was good. And did like the complete opposite of everything, and just did whatever and just kind of tuned them out.
Let me just interrupt you real quick. When you sit on your butt and talk to people for 40 years, you hear lots of stories. And a lot of young people will say to me, you know what? People have told me I can't play college softball. Well, damn them, I'm gonna. You hear it from people all the time. And I think a lot of really psychologically healthy people said that somewhere in their childhood. They usually don't say, I'm going to prove my gremlin wrong, but I think a lot of people have flourished with your very approach, Jen. I think a lot of people have. Are there other comments about this gremlin?
But so in raising my daughter in particular, because she's my first, I just took a total opposite approach, and I just had a very, a very optimistic, you can do anything approach.
Yeah.
And which was working really, really well up until she was 17, and then got involved with a boy.
Oh yes, I'm sure we're all familiar with the danger of romance.
Yeah, danger zone.
But back to the gremlin thing. Again, no one goes to cocktail parties and says, how you doing with your negative self-talk? All that stuff was remanded to the therapist's office. And I think it's an odd way. I think it's an odd way to avoid thinking about and sort of curing, in the terms of like curing a ham, salting it or heating it, and curing the way you think. Like, I think most of our troubles at this point as adults are between our ears. So Bill, you asked.
Well, to this day, the person still tells me I can't do this. The first thing out of their mouth is, you can't do that.
Well, and
Literally.
not to go down this rabbit hole, but people need to project their own insecurities and make others feel poorly. And that's why they do it. I mean, how many times, I've been a school social worker, kids come in my office crying and say, Timmy, Louise told me I stink at this, that, and the other thing. And how many times have you as parents said, well, that's just because, Louise is insecure herself and she's making you feel badly. And that's where that is, But Bill, back your question about how do we get kids? I mean, I think it'd be amazing, and we can talk about this later in the week, Bill, but I think we should be doing classes with kids on managing, not anxiety, but on managing outcome fever, which is what I think the kids all have. I think they're terribly worried about the outcome of most everything they do. And I think we need to name that, the elephant, and help them relax and get back to the 6 eyes. And I know this is a lot, but get back to a place. No, it's Bill, tomorrow, if you went to Winnicott and canceled all morning classes and had a treasure hunt on campus or in Hampton, like freshmen versus sophomores, you'd be a hero for the next 60 years in the minds of all those kids. Why? Because McGowan canceled class and we had so much fun with the treasure hunt. What the kids wouldn't think is, yeah, we're using our imagination. McGowan trusts us. We're independent. We're roaming Hampton, looking for some stupid thing that was hidden under the Hampton Beach Casino by the whatever it was, right? And these kids do not have enough fun to and I know we've got 8 minutes. They don't have enough fun to build the 5 eyes, imagination, intestinal fortitude, integrity, intimacy. And I'm forgetting the 5th one because I'm old and it's late at night. But they don't have the experiences to build that stuff. They really don't. So the gremlin, if you can defeat your gremlin, that's icing on the cake for you. And by the way, I'm going to sound like a talk show call-in person, but my wife and I don't have kids, so I never had to say no to my 14-year-old. But you hear it all the time by armchair commentators, like parents have forgotten how to be parents and they want their kids to like them. You know what I mean? There are kids that want to kind of don't like you, Bill, right? Because you're the principal and you said, stop that, don't do it again, right? But a lot of parents, they really have trouble saying no. If you do that again, you're gonna be, you know what I mean? And we've got to get back to a place because kids need, the only kids we've had are puppies. And if you don't train a puppy, you're going to be at the vet's, he's going to chew up your cordovan loafers, he's going to urinate on your nice piece of furniture. We all know it. Kids are kind of the same. You've got to be able to say no, it's really important. So there's been a lot discussed here tonight. I'll just shut up. Are there any questions or comments? And I see Courtney McKechnie joined a little while ago. If that's you, you're 8 years old and surfing. So I'm guessing that's the little kid's mom. Any questions or comments? And Pam, I have to give you the Courage Award because you're relaxing, you look like you're lying in bed and your camera's on, and who cares? So I love that. Anybody? I have a good view of my wife's plants there. Those are not marijuana plants, just so that you know. That is a ficus tree, I think. Any comments? Any questions? Susan, iPhone 879. Anybody? Going once. Comments, thoughts?
Thank you.
You're welcome, Heidi. I'm going to pronounce your last name correctly now. Ready for this? Tarasina.
You bet. Good job.
Like that, McGowan, huh? Tarasina. If there are no further comments, we can stop early. And in the chat, if you know how to use it, you have the YouTube links for parent webinars 1 through 4 there. And those are in the chat. So let's keep this going a minute so people can cut and paste that if you're interested. And we will, of course, call on Abby in a moment to give the final benediction.
I will do that in 1 minute, but I want to add the link for 2 weeks from today, because that might be helpful for people too. So I need 1 minute too.
I mean, the Zoom link, it's
Yeah.
the same as it was tonight, right? It's
No, I
always
know,
the
but
same.
just so people can save it in their, wherever you save these things.
One new message. Unye, you didn't tell me how to pronounce your name. I feel I'm butchering it. Brandon, I can do. If you come on and tell me, is it Unye?
Hi, this is Ugna,
Ugna, thank you.
and you got Brandon right.
Yes, that was the easy part, Ugna.
We have small kids in the background, so we're trying to keep it quiet and less distracting.
How did you hear about the parent webinar?
Through New School on Nantucket,
Nantucket, got it.
and we'll
All
try
right.
to join next time. Thank you very much. That was really helpful.
Excellent. There's the Zoom link for the next time.
It's really
Courtney,
not, because I only sent it to you. 1 second.
Oh, yeah, you got it. Courtney, you had your camera on, so we can see you there. We know you're real. How did you hear about the webinar, Courtney?
The same Nantucket New School,
Nantucket New School. How's the weather on Nantucket today?
getting better every day. Today was beautiful.
I just saw, I think, a little blonde-haired kid over your right shoulder.
That's mine. That's Bo. That's
Bo.
the little one that's in the water in the picture.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Gotcha. And he's surfing out down the beach. And Susan,
Exactly.
Susan, how did you hear about this? If you dare demute. There we go.
Hi,
Susan, I knew it was you.
my daughter goes to Winnicott.
Excellent.
She's a junior.
McGowan told me she is the best student at the school.
Uh,
I'm
Yeah.
just kidding. That was, you weren't on, I don't think, but he said that about Heidi's. But thank you, Susan. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Abby has the link. Tell all your friends, we're trying to get 1,000 parents to come on this thing one of these nights.
The link is up for 2 weeks from today at 7. So we can let everyone go 2 minutes early if you'd like, Jeff.
2 minutes early. Don't be late for your next class.
We'll let everyone go.
Thank you all.